Hello, welcome to InfoHub-In-Depth. Do you know that a special document was laid before the National Assembly on August 8 that will guide how revenues from the petroleum and other sectors will be prudently managed to ensure current and future generations benefit? We tell you what the Green Paper is and how it will help to achieve government's vision of a green, inclusive economy.
The future of Guyana has never looked better. Our nation is on the cusp of a development program like never seen before. While Guyana is now emerging as an energy giant through the discovery of massive reserves of oil and natural gas, it is your government's intention that the huge benefits emerging from this will go where it matters most, to you, the people of this beloved country. There is a surge of confidence in the way Guyana is governed once again, and the level of investor interest is unprecedented. Guyana is poised to become the breadbasket of the region, and the pace at which this nation will grow through prudent fiscal management will be nothing short of impressive. But more than anything else will be the way every Guyanese, regardless of color, class, or creed, becomes a part of this historic period of national transformation, sharing in the wealth and well-being of it all as one Guyana.
Government will be establishing a natural resource fund to invest the revenues to be obtained from oil and gas. This report outlines the importance of the fund and its operation, as detailed in a Green Paper laid in the National Assembly on August 8.
The Green Paper captures key issues for consideration and includes mechanisms to ensure sustainable use of petroleum resources. Government believes the establishment of a single fund, the Natural Resource Fund or NRF, will be the most effective, efficient and transparent mechanism for achieving multiple objectives of intergenerational savings, stabilization and investing in development priorities. Minister of Finance Winston Jordan.
The fiscal rule options that have been proposed within the Green Paper are designed to achieve these objectives. Mr. Speaker, the first of these listed objectives, stabilization, is particularly important for resource-rich countries that are dependent on natural resources for two simple reasons. One, commodity prices are volatile, and two, production levels can be difficult to predict. These two factors can result in unstable revenue and, by extension, government spending, which will negatively impact the stability and scale of social programs and interventions.
Historically, in recognizing the need to both save and spend incoming oil revenues while ensuring future generations benefit, the establishment of a Sovereign Wealth Fund or SWF was proposed. However, the government, after careful examination of several factors, including the additional administrative costs of establishing two funds and examples of countries that established multiple sovereign wealth funds but failed to manage their revenues effectively, concluded that a single NRF will be most effective. According to the Green Paper, a single fund can achieve multiple objectives with a robust fiscal rule. Establishing a sovereign wealth fund is relatively complex and there can be substantial administrative costs. Economic modeling also demonstrates that with Guyana's proposed fiscal rule, known as the Economically and Fiscally Sustainable Amount Rule, a single fund will lead to economic stabilization and substantial long-term savings. This would avoid increased administrative costs that establishing multiple funds would entail. The government cited case studies of Botswana, Norway and Nigeria which show having multiple funds are no guarantee of achieving savings and stabilization objectives.
Finance Minister Winston Jordan says the Natural Resource Fund will ensure the sustainable use of revenues from the petroleum sector to achieve a diversified and green economy and, moreover, to avoid the mismanagement of the national patrimony.
According to the Finance Minister Winston Jordan, the paper captures key issues and mechanisms that will ensure the sustainable use of revenues from the petroleum sector to achieve a diversified and green economy and avoid the mismanagement of the national patrimony. It will also act as a guide to avoid the dreaded pre-source curse and ensure that all Guyanese, especially youths and future generations, benefit from the windfall revenues.
The first of these listed objectives, stabilization, is particularly important for resource-rich countries that are dependent on natural resources for two simple reasons. One, commodity prices are volatile, and two, production levels can be difficult to predict. These two factors can result in unstable revenue and, by extension, government spending, which will negatively impact the stability and scale of social programs and interventions. To achieve this, a portion of revenues will be invested in safe and liquid assets external to the domestic economy.
The Green Paper also proposes the investment of portions of petroleum sector revenues in foreign markets to prevent an economic collapse or the depletion of the country's oil reserves.
This also allows for public spending during resource extraction to be maintained or increased long after extraction has ended. Given the uncertainty surrounding the future of fossil fuels, it is necessary for savings to begin from day one of production. To achieve this function, revenues will be invested in diversified portfolio comprised of financial assets external to the domestic economy with long investment horizons and higher expected returns.
The Sovereign Wealth Fund is now called the National Resource Fund and was touted by the Minister of Natural Resources, Raphael Trotman, soon after the confirmation of an offshore oil discovery in 2015. The Commonwealth and other international stakeholders were engaged in the drafting of its contents.
The passage of the Natural Resource Fund Act will enable the establishment of the Natural Resource Fund to efficiently manage the country's natural resource wealth. This was highlighted in government's Green Paper.
Once the Natural Resource Fund is established following the passage of the legislation, it will ensure the prudent management of revenues accrued from natural resources for the benefit of current and future generations. This was highlighted in the government's Green Paper on the NRF, which was laid in the National Assembly recently. According to the Green Paper, establishment of the fund will contribute to economic stabilization by ensuring that the volatility on natural resource revenues does not lead to volatile public spending. The administration's plan is to have the fair transfer of natural resource wealth across generations. The natural resource wealth will be used to finance development priorities through the national budget towards the creation of an inclusive green economy. The Green Paper outlines that petroleum revenues as well as excess revenues from mining and forestry will be deposited into the NRF. The NRF will be a US dollar bank account held by the Bank of Guyana from which withdrawals will be made based on a fiscal rule. Minister of Finance Winston Jordan explained to the National Assembly why this is necessary.
We must avoid the resource course at all costs. To do this, we must manage injections to domestic spending. And when we do invest, we must ensure that these investments are catalytic and promote economic diversification so that we realize an economy that is strong and resilient, that can stand on its own long after oil has been depleted. Within the principles of good financial management, these investments will be guided by the National Development Plan, our Green State Development Strategy, and executed via the national budget as occurs in countries that have been successful in harnessing effectively natural resource revenue for development, such as Norway and Botswana.
Withdrawals from the Natural Resource Fund will be deposited into the Consolidated Fund to form part of the financing streams of the annual budget, along with loans, tax, and non-tax revenues.
A Sovereign Investment Committee will be set up to advise the Minister of Finance on the investment mandate as it relates to the Natural Resource Fund. We now tell you the composition and duties of that committee.
The government's Green Paper on the Natural Resource Fund, NRF, proposes the establishment of the Sovereign Investment Committee to advise Minister of Finance Winston Jordan on the investment mandate as it relates to the NRF's management. The committee, appointed by Minister Jordan, will comprise 7 members. Among the members are a representative of the Finance Minister, an ex officio representative nominated by the Bank of Guyana's governor, and an Institute of Chartered Accountants of Guyana nominated representative. The Green Paper specifies that the committee members comprise persons with substantial experience, training, and expertise in financial investments and financial portfolio management. A senior investment advisor and analyst would also be recruited via international open tender. The advisor would be responsible for assisting Minister Jordan in drafting the investment mandate and report and monitor the financial performance of the NRF, among other duties. According to the Green Paper, the National Assembly would be responsible for passing the NRF Act, approving the annual national budget, which would include the annual withdrawal from the NRF, and reviewing the annual report. The Bank of Guyana would be the operational manager of the fund and do so in accordance with the operational agreement and the investment mandate. Quarterly reports and annual accounts and procurement of private managers and draft management agreements will also fall under the bank's purview.
The government's Green Paper says the Natural Resource Fund will fully conform to the Santiago Principles, which consist of 24 generally accepted principles which govern such facilities.
The Santiago Principles are principles and practices voluntarily endorsed by the members of the International Forum of Sovereign Wealth Funds. They promote transparency, good governance, accountability, and prudent investment practices, which encourages open dialogue and deeper understanding of sovereign wealth fund activities. The management of the Natural Resource Fund, NRF, will be guided by these. This is specified in the government's Green Paper, Managing Future Petroleum Revenues, and establishment of a fiscal rule and a sovereign wealth fund. The Santiago Principles were welcomed by the International Monetary Fund's International Monetary Financial Committee in 2008. Among the objectives are compliance with applicable regulatory and disclosure requirements in countries in which sovereign wealth funds invest. These ensure that the funds have a transparent and good governance structure that provides adequate operational controls, risk management, and accountability. The government has committed to ensuring that our NRF is fully aligned with these internationally acceptable standards, as the preparation begins for petroleum production come 2020. To ensure this, the Natural Resource Fund Act would provide a detailed and sound legal framework for the operation of the NRF. According to the Green Paper, the Act will make clear that the NRF would have no legal personality and would effectively be a pool of investments held by the Bank of Guyana. The responsibilities of the National Assembly, the Ministry of Finance, the Bank of Guyana, the Macroeconomic Committee, and the Sovereign Investment Committee will be clearly outlined in the Act. Implementation of the aforementioned will ensure that the Natural Resource Fund, NRF, fully complies with Principle 1. The Green Paper details fully the mechanisms that will be put in place to guarantee compliance with all 24 Santiago Principles.
Why when I drink and I get smoking on? Hey barman, y'all don't sell cigarettes anymore?
The new tobacco law says we can't have cigarettes on public display and we can't advertise that we sell it.
Okay, give my pack.
You can't do that in here, buddy. The law states that you can't smoke in an enclosed area. You have to go outside.
I think that's how they do it in foreign. So, the law finally comes again. I'm glad though.
Let's all work together to prevent cigarette smoking-related illnesses.
The Green Paper on the Natural Resource Fund outlines several mechanisms that will ensure the proper management of the revenues. Among these measures is the establishment of a Sovereign Investment Committee. This group, along with the Minister of Finance, the Bank of Guyana, and private managers, will hold responsibility of managing the Natural Resource Fund. We now take a look at the composition of the committee, its responsibilities, and that of other players.
The Green Paper proposes the establishment of the Sovereign Investment Committee to advise Minister of Finance Winston Jordan on the investment mandate as it relates to the management of the Natural Resource Fund, NRF. The committee will comprise 7 members appointed by Minister Jordan. Among the members, a representative of the Finance Minister, an ex officio representative nominated by the Governor of the Bank of Guyana, an ex officio representative nominated by the Minister of Natural Resources, a representative nominated by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Guyana, a representative nominated by the opposition leader, a senior investment advisor and analyst, a representative nominated by the Guyana Association of Bankers. Committee members would be persons with substantial experience, training, and expertise in financial investments and financial portfolio management. A minimum of a postgraduate degree from a reputable university in the fields of finance or economics or an equivalent professional qualification is required. The senior investment advisor and analyst would also be recruited via international open tender. The person would be responsible for assisting Minister Jordan in drafting the investment mandate, as well as report and monitor the financial performance of the NRF, among other duties as determined by the Minister of Finance and the Sovereign Investment Committee. According to the Green Paper, the National Assembly would be responsible for passing the NRF Act, approving the annual national budget, which would include the annual withdrawal from the NRF, and reviewing the annual report.
The Bank of Guyana would be the operational manager of the fund and is required to run it in accordance with the operational agreement and the investment mandate. Quarterly reports and annual accounts and procurement of private managers, draft management agreements, and investment instructions will also fall under the bank's remit.
The private managers would manage the overall investment portfolio in accordance with the management agreement and investment instructions and submit reports to the Bank of Guyana. Notwithstanding the investments through the national budget, the fund, in order to become sustainable and achieve all of its objectives, must also utilize overseas financial investments. The overseas assets investments would serve to ensure a long-term, stable source of income, which would allow for the fund to meet its stabilization and intergenerational savings objectives. Minister of Finance, Winston Jordan.
A portion of revenues will be invested in safe and liquid assets external to the domestic economy. Mr. Speaker, the second key function of our sovereign wealth fund is savings, to ensure the equitable distribution of benefits of the extraction of non-renewable resources across current and future generations. This will allow for the transformation of a depleting asset base, that is oil, to a permanent asset base, that is financial assets. This also allows for public spending during resource extraction to be maintained or increased long after extraction has ended. Given the uncertainties surrounding the future of fossil fuels, it is necessary for savings to begin from day one of production. To achieve this function, revenues will be invested in diversified portfolio comprised of financial assets external to the domestic economy with long investment horizons and higher expected returns.
The Green Paper proposes that safe investments would be mandatory, such that the first US $500 million and at least 3 times that expected annual withdrawal would be invested in very safe investments in the form of eligible bank deposits and treasury bills. This will ensure that the NRF meets short-term stabilization and cash management objectives.
Reporting and auditing requirements of the NRF would be extensive. The Green Paper states that this task will lie with the Ministry of Finance, which would lay an annual report in the Parliament each fiscal year and provide further reporting throughout the annual budget process. Reporting and audit requirements would ensure that all petroleum revenues are accounted for.
Minister Jordan explained that the NRF will be managed in accordance with the Santiago Principles to ensure good governance and transparency. The Santiago Principles consist of 24 generally accepted principles and practices voluntarily endorsed by the members of the International Forum of Sovereign Wealth Funds. The principles promote transparency, good governance, accountability, prudent investment practices, encourages open dialogue and deeper understanding of sovereign wealth fund activities. The Natural Resource Fund would operate in a transparent manner and fully conform to the Santiago Principles.
The Green Paper acknowledges the urgent need for strengthened institutions and systems to support strong governance and oversight. Investing in human capital and increasing national capacity to effectively absorb resources must be paramount.
We must save for current and future generations, but this has to be balanced with the need to invest to overcome the human and physical and technological capital constraint that restricts Guyana from realizing her full growth potential. For example, there are significant infrastructure gaps that exist, especially with respect to connecting the coast and the hinterland. And these need to be addressed. But we must also be cognizant of the capacity of the domestic economy to absorb significant increases in expenditure, as well as the capacity of the public service to effectively and efficiently implement expanded programs and deliver quality services.
The Green Paper also recommends that the government maximizes the capacity of every Guyanese while taking preemptive actions to avoid a pre-source curse.
To do this, we must manage injections to domestic spending. And when we do invest, we must ensure that these investments are catalytic and promote economic diversification so that we realize an economy that is strong and resilient, that can stand on its own long after oil has been depleted. Within the principles of good financial management, these investments will be guided by the National Development Plan, our Green State Development Strategy, and executed via the national budget, as occurs in countries that have been successful in harnessing effectively natural resource revenue for development, such as Norway and Botswana. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal rule options that allow for these 3 objectives to be met emerged after considering many other fiscal rules that were implemented with varying degrees of effectiveness. The proposed options have benefited from sensitivity analysis testing across various factors, including prices and production. We are confident that the fiscal rule that is eventually decided upon will serve the needs of current and future generations. It will hold the promise to be a model for other countries to emulate, especially given its potential to achieve the many goals already mentioned, a feat that only few countries have achieved.
The resource curse has become a recognized condition and is characterized by elevated expectations, which can lead to below standard results.
The government recognizes that while the Natural Resource Fund represents a step along the continuum of legislative reforms that must be in place to support the petroleum sector, legislation alone will not enable good governance of revenues. Therefore, rigorous project appraisal systems and prioritization will be necessary, along with improved technical competencies across sectors to ensure the required pace and quality of innovations to achieve a diversified green economy. This brings us to the end of another edition of InfoHub In-Depth. Thanks for watching.
Boy, when I drink and I get smoking on. Hey, barman, y'all don't sell cigarettes anymore?
The new tobacco law says we can't have cigarettes on public display and we can't advertise that we sell it.
Okay, give my pack.
You can't do that in here, buddy. The law states that you can't smoke in an enclosed area. You have to go outside.
I think this is how they do it in foreign. So, the last time we come together, I'm glad though.
Let's all work together to prevent cigarette smoking related illnesses.
Roundabouts. Approaching a roundabout. When you approach a roundabout, you must use your indicator if you intend to turn left or right or make a U-turn at the roundabout. You must give other road users sufficient notice of your intent to turn. Entering a roundabout. When entering a roundabout, you must slow or stop to give way to any vehicle already in the roundabout. You must also continue to use your indicators if you intend to turn left or right or make a U-turn. Turning left. When turning left, you must indicate left on approach and be travelling in the left-hand lane unless there are road markings with other instructions. Stay in the left lane and exit in the left lane. Turning right. When turning right, you must indicate right on approach and be travelling in the right-hand lane unless there are road markings with other instructions. Making a U-turn. When using a roundabout to make a U-turn, you must approach in the right lane and signal right. Changing lanes in a roundabout. Drivers may change lanes in a roundabout if they wish. The usual road rules for changing lanes apply. You must use your indicator and give way to any vehicle in the lane you are entering. Going straight ahead. You don't need to signal when approaching the roundabout if you are going straight ahead. You may approach the roundabout from either the left or right lane unless there are road markings with other instructions. Exiting a roundabout. As when you exit a road, you must signal left when leaving a roundabout, if it is practical to do so, and you should stop indicating as soon as you have exited the roundabout. However, when you are travelling straight ahead on a small single-lane roundabout, it may be impractical to indicate when exiting.